I do have to ask you because, like, what kind of got you into like Persian history?
Right. So I started encountering Persia as part of a religious studies class in my freshman year of college
Okay,
through the study of Zoroastrianism. It was a course on the origins of different religions, going through in a mostly chronological order. And part of the class was the TA convinced the professor to give us extra credit for doing a response essay to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast on the ancient Persians. That podcast doesn't mention religion at all, but it was relevant enough that she got it included. And when it came around to time to write our term papers, I was a contrarian 18-year-old and wanted to pick a topic nobody else was ever going to cover. So I went with Zoroastrianism and wrote about the history of its origins, going off of the idea that I had encountered through that podcast, which was its relationship to ancient Persia, and went down the rabbit hole from there. Started studying it on my own and taking classes that I could make relevant to it, even if they weren't technically relevant in the syllabus. And from there, just kind of got into it on my own and changed some of my degree path around that.
okay, that's interesting. You know, it's actually funny when I was actually traveling to India and over there I actually saw like a Zoroastrian temple. I remember seeing it.
Oh yeah, were you in Mumbai?
Yeah, I think it might have been actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, either that or it was New Delhi. I don't remember. Yeah.
there's a very large Zoroastrian community called the Parsis
Yeah.
in and around Mumbai.
Yeah. I think it was called like Parsi Temple or something like that in that
Yeah,
regard.
and I should make it clear to anybody listening. When I say very large, I mean very large compared to a group whose global population is somewhere around 200,000 people.
Oh,
Today, it
really?
is a
Okay.
very small religion, despite being one of the great and widespread religions of ancient history.
Yeah. You know, I actually have an interesting question. Maybe you can answer it. I know like nowadays they don't really accept converts in Zoroastrianism, but like historically, did they accept converts? Do you know of that? Or
Yes, they did. And that's a specifically Indian and Parsi phenomenon, really.
okay,
There hasn't been much drive in other places for people to convert to Zoroastrianism for most of the last 1300 years. But strictly speaking, like the Iranian community never had a prohibition against it. It's just there were more people converting out of Zoroastrianism and into Islam than the other way around.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I know the main like figure of Zoroastrianism is like Prophet Zoroaster, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, like this was obviously like somewhat like it's a pretty ancient religion, of course, that has been around for a while and surprisingly has like still survived to this day.
Yeah. Based on our best estimates from analyzing the language in the scripture and when people started referencing Zoroaster and how they referenced him, the estimate is around 1300 BC for when he was doing his actual personal preaching.
Okay, okay. And I know even like in Zoroastrianism they have like I guess like sects within that. And I think one of them was like Mazdakism, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yes, Mazdakism's a really interesting topic within ancient Persia and Zoroastrianism. Uh, it refers to a specific, like lower level priest who gained prominence and got in with the royal court during the Sassanid Persian Empire around uh, the late 400s CE. And it preached a kind of communalist ideal, you know, share property, hold everything in common,
Yeah,
you know, strip a lot of the property power away from the nobility.
yeah,
And it's no wonder that started gaining a lot of popularity during a drought, and irritated the nobility so much they chased the king in question, Kavad the First, out of the country.
yeah. And I know obviously that one was a specific sect, but I think there was also another religion, and I think it's very minor. Like during that time, there was, I believe it's called Manichaeism. If I'm,
Manichaeism,
yeah,
yeah, uh, that's another interesting one. It started with a prophet named Mani in
yeah,
the area around Babylon, about I want to say 100 years before the Mazdakites, and it took elements of Zoroastrianism and a little bit of Buddhism, which was starting to spread into the Persian Empire around then, and mixed them in with specifically the Gnostic side of Christianity, uh, and which gets into a lot of really unconventional by today's standards metaphysics and philosophy about the universe.
yeah. I think there's only like a very, very small like minority community that exists, like maybe in China. That's what I've heard, right?
There at least was into the early modern period. Strictly speaking, I don't think anybody identifies as Manichaean or original Manichaean anymore.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's neo Manichaean communities, just like there's neo everything else now. But
yeah,
uh, it definitely had an impact on some schools of Chinese philosophy.
yeah. No, that's true. And I know there's obviously like various Persian Persian empires, right? And of course, each one most of them, I would say, probably adopted Zoroastrianism more than the minor religions that we mentioned. Like
Yes.
more than
No, go ahead.
I don't know. I was just saying, like more than likely, they probably adopted Zoroastrianism. Like,
Yes, they all started with it. As far as we can tell, the first Persian Empire, the Achaemenid dynasty,
yeah,
already had some form of Zoroastrianism when it got started in the 6th century BCE. Um, but of course, at that point, the Zoroastrian scripture called the Avesta was still being written. It's a lot like the Bible in that it's a bunch of different works written over the course of many centuries.
yeah,
So you'll run into academics debating, oh, well, was it really Zoroastrianism if it didn't have this, this, and this? And well, of course it didn't have that. That part hadn't been written yet, but that doesn't make it less derived from the prophet Zoroaster. So I think it counts.
yeah. No, that's a good point.